Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So first Shankara Bhagavad Pada explained the nature of Annamaya Kosha, and then he explained about the Pranamaya Kosha. So he was, as we saw in the last loka, Naivatmayam Pranamayo Vayu Ganta Ganta Vayuvadan Vaduvantar Bahireshaha Yasmat Kinchitvapi Naveti Ishtamanishtam Swam Vanyam Va Kinchana Nityam Paratantraha. Why the Pranamaya Kosha cannot be the Atman? Because it is just like the effect of the wind. Like the wind it comes, like the wind it goes out. It's not aware of anything that is good or bad, but the Atman is ever aware, ever alert to everything. Nothing escapes the Atman, is full of the nature of consciousness. Obviously, because it is completely dependent on something else for its existence, it is not existing by itself, so it cannot be the Atman. That the question was over. Why? Because, in the if the Pranamaya Kosha were to be the Atman, it would also be awake in sleep, etc. etc. If it is awake, then it should be aware of whatever happens, but it is not aware. So obviously, for these reasons, the Pranamaya Kosha cannot be the Atman. Now he's talking about the Manomaya Kosha. We are, as we all know, there are Pancha Koshas, the 5 Koshas which cover the Atman and create the illusion that it is this, it is that, and so on, and take us away from the reality. So this is called the Maya or the Abrana and Vikshepa Shakti of this we are slowly seeing. Jnanendriyani cha manascha manomaya syat kosho mamahamiti vastu vikalpa hetu sanyadi bheda kalana kalito baliyan tat purva kosham anupurya vijrambate yaha. So, the organs of knowledge, Jnanendriyani, and the mind, they form the Manomaya Kosha. So, what is its Swarupa? It is the cause of the sense of I and mind and the manifoldness of things. Vastu Vikalpa Hetu. Mama Ahamiti, that is what gives a feeling, me and mine, or I and mine. And it is also the reason for the Vastu Vikalpa Hetu, for the manifoldness of things. We see so many because of the mind. And then it manifests itself as, so it is creates the differences of name, etc. Sanyadi Beda Kalana Kalito. So the when you first talk about is the reason for the manifoldness. So as a next step we see so many names and forms, so much of different items, different things we know differently. It's all because of that. And then it's Baliyan, it is quite powerful. Then that Purva Kosham Anupurya Vijrumbate Yaha. It also manifests itself what pervades the previous Pranamaya Kosha. Just we saw Pranamaya Kosha was really responsible for the existence of Annamaya Kosha. Now, for the existence of Pranamaya Kosha, the Manomaya Kosha is important. Without the Manomaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha cannot be there. So, the Kosha that is called with the name is Manomaya Kosha. It's called Manomaya because all the activities of all the organs are dependent on the mind. Otherwise, you would have called Shrotamaya Kosha, Chakshmaya Kosha, etc. Why it is called Manomaya Kosha? Because that is a central thing in which everything is centered. So, not only it is the waking state, but even during the dream, the sense organs, etc., are absolutely inactive. They don't function at all. But mind by itself it functions and gives us so much of experience, etc., just by the mind itself. Therefore, the they are all included in the same kosha, all the indriyas. A person says, I hear, I see, I touch, etc. All this, there is a sense of the Atman, which is said to do these things. So, the Manomaya Krishna appears as if it were the Atman, hence the name kosha. See, everywhere, we have been seeing consistently the wrong identification. Identification of the body. Body is assumed to be the Atman. That's why there is so much of suffering, there is so much of maya, so much of bandhana. Again and again, the repeated birth and death, samsara sagar, it's all because of the wrong identification, mistaking the body to be the Atman. So naturally, these are all what constitutes the body. All these five koshas is the jiva is not only just the body and its evolutes, then body, prana, mind, etc., annamaya, etc. So naturally, because all these are all wrongly assumed to be the Atman, hence it is called the kosha, is the kind of a covering archi. And then mama ahamiti vastu vikalpa hetu. The effect of this is the cause of the identification or speaking of things as mine, I, etc. It produces a sense of I in the body and the sense organs and the sense of mind in the external things like, house, car, money, whatever is outside us, whatever is outside our personality, outside our body, outside our mind, there it comes as mine. Here it comes as I. I am this, I am that, I am this body, I am the mind, I am the indriyas, I am all that, I constantly. And then when it comes with the external things, it's mine. It is my house, my property, my husband, my wife, my child, my furniture, my everything is. So these are the two things. And then Sangyanadi, Bheda Kalana Kalitaha. This sense is what is that? The form this variety. What is the form it takes? Sanya here means name. Are these included to show its shades, etc.? Things are variously distinguished by their name and forms. So it's all what's called Ghata, the famous instance, Ghata, Kalasa, Kumbha, etc. They are distinguished differently because of the name and the form. Thus, all the objects are distinguished, variously realized by their name and form. So, all these modifications relating to the sound and object, etc., they depend on the mind. In the world, there is no object devoid of name and form. Hence, the world is dependent on the mind for its activity. Because it's only the mind that determines. What is it that determines whatever? Supposing you take a book in your hand, what is it that determines that it's a book? It's only the mind. It's because of the mind only we are able to recognize it. So the entire world of name and form is completely dependent upon the mind. Of course, there are so much to be gone into that. It's all because of the previous experience, the memory in the past, somewhere other due to something we have experienced, and that is stored as samskaras. When the same thing appears before us, again there's a recognition. Oh, this is a book that I have experienced before. Sometimes, quite often it can be related to previous, a number of births to the extent we can remember. We all sometimes, when it comes, when you are not able to exactly fix it, we struggle, understand it wrongly, then it gets corrected somewhere and all that. That's how the experience with the sense objects keep on happening again and again. Then another word he uses is baliyan. It's powerful because the bondage and liberation depend on the mind. So you can understand how powerful it is. So the ability to know, the jnana shakti that is not present in annamaya or pranamaya. Annamaya is only stula. There's nothing is totally gross. Pranamaya is like the wind coming in and going out. It does not recognize any good or bad in anything, either in itself or outside. So the first point of knowing, the first time we gather some knowledge is because of the Manomaya Kosha. So this Manomaya Kosha pervades the Pranamaya Kosha. Of course, that itself is again pervaded by the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So pervading, it does all actions. सवायेष पुरुषविदः एव पुरुषविद एव तस्य पुरुषविदताम् अन्वयं पुरुषविद etc. Upanishad. So all that, one pervading the other, it goes on. First Annamaya, Pranamaya goes pervaded by Manomaya, Manomaya by Vijnanamaya, Vijnanamaya by Anandamaya. So that's how each gives credence, each gives meaning or existence to the previous kosha, without which it cannot function. Slowly we explain at every point of time. And then how does the Manomaya Kosha create? How does it create this bondage? Explains beautifully. Panchendriyehi panchabhireve hotribihi prachiyamano vishayajya dharaya jadvalyamano bahuvasanendanehi manomayognihi manomayognihi dahati prapancham. This Manomaya Kosha is compared to a sacrificial fire. The sacrificial fire that is burning. So in that Homa Kunda, the 5 organs, Panchendriya, the objects of knowledge, they are the sacrificing priests. They are sitting. The 5 organs, the eye, ear, nose, then mouth, and then the skin, they sit as the Hotre or the presiding priest. They are sitting there. And what is the Prachiyamano Vishaya Ajya Dhara? What is the Ajya Dhara? What is the pouring of ghee? What is the ghee or the oblations? Oblations are the sense objects. Oblations, sense objects are poured by the Hotre, the priest. They only pour the oblations into the Homagni or the fire. So these objects, sense objects, they bring this, the senses, they bring the sense objects and pour them as oblation like ghee into the fire. So that's a very, very beautiful analogy, because they are sitting like the priest, and then the senses, the priest, they gather all these, whatever is required for ahuti, like ghee, like a dhara, in a continuous action of pouring, they pour the oblation into the fire, namely the manomaya. And then what is the fuel? See, you cannot simply, supposing you have set up a homakunda, there is no firewood, there is no fuel, only you pour ghee, will it burn? No, first you must have the fuel, the indhana. Jadvalyamano bahuvasanendane. The indhana, bahuvasana indhane. All these vasanas, they are the indhana, they are the fuels, they are the firewood. So, because of that, those various vasanas, they are burning because of that. Manomayognihi dahati prapancha. With this, the Manomaya Kosha burns the whole world. So, it's given through a beautiful analogy as a sacrificial fire. So, the vasanas, why these vasanas are called the firewood or the indhana or the fuel? Because you see, we'll see that the 5 organs, namely the ear, skin, eye, tongue, and the nose, are the hutas, they are the priests. They perform the action of pouring the ahuti or the havish into the fire. So these are the, then each brings its own object, the sense objects. The ear brings the sound, and then the skin brings the touch, the color, and then the taste and smell, etc. They're all brought by the sense objects. Sense objects are brought in by the senses. They are like the clarified butter whose continuous flow feeds the fire. Because of the, unless you keep constantly pouring ghee into the ahuti, along with every ahuti, the ghee must be there. So if you offer bilpata, Even a vilva leaves also you have to soak it in ghee and then give us ahuti in the fire. Then only it will burn. It burns very well because of the fire. And then you see each particular organ throws its particular vishaya and the fire of the mind. Because the eye brings its, ear brings something, nose brings something. Each brings its own special objects and throws it into the fire of the manomaya. And then what are these? If the flow will be meaningful only if the fuel is present. What are these vasanas? Prachiyamana. See, the fire is made to grow, become blazing fire because the combination of fuel and the hubby. Then vasanas are, see, what is vasana? That is called vasana, which makes for the spontaneous recall of an object in the mind by the previous intense thought of it without the reflection of the antecedent and the subsequent. There's a very beautiful shloka which says, Vrida bhavanaya tyakta purva paravicharanam yadadanam padarthasya vasana sa prakritirita. See, the recall of the objects. Where I said, whatever we do, all the experience we have, there's a previous experience, the vasana. Now, whatever we do, as I said, the mind is such a fertile field. It's like a supercomputer. It completely registers. So, supposing you eat a rasagulla, the taste, the experience of it, it doesn't go end with your tasting it or completely consuming it. It leaves what is called a bhija, the vasana bhija in the mind, karma bhija. So, whenever you see anything similar, whenever you go via this Bangla sweet stall, and you see in the counter so much big rasagullas are floating in the syrup, immediately the mind gets collected, again connected to the earlier experience, vasana. That gets stored. That is vasana. So all our experiences are all because of previous vasana. Now, whatever you think is a new experience, it gets stored. Next time it would get recalled. So similarly, whatever we are recalling now is because some other time we had experienced and got them stored. That's why we are recalling. So these vasanas, that is where the real problem comes. That is why one has to be extremely careful about what we do. Whatever we do, immediately that gets stored in the mind as a vasana. So quite often people, we are little careless. Oh, we do something, we touch something, we see something, we indulge something, thinking that it is just once. It is not once. So many people are get caught in this nasha of drinking or some drugs or this or that because they just very innocently participated once. But the vasanas are so strong, it is irresistible. They are never able to get rid of it all their life. So this is his vasanas. That is really the fuel. Actually, the main thing is fuel. The fuel gets really ignited. It becomes a blazing fire because of the ahuti. Whatever is there in the store, mere fuel also will not make the fire. It has to be lighted, and then you have to pour ghee also. Still, it will burn, but then it's strengthened by the constant bringing of newer and newer sense objects, vishayas, through that fire. Then it becomes a blazing fire. So the vasanas are the binding agencies. They are wrongly thought of as giving pleasure, and they are sought after. Constantly, whatever has happened, we think that is no. Quite often, see whatever one might have experienced, you think of it, and then you feel that you have not got it. There's disappointment. Quite often, that leads to raga, dvesha, many heinous crimes people commit because it is vasana. They met somebody once and then assume certain things and they spend their life over that. They are not able to achieve their objective. They get wild, they get mad, and they indulge in ever so many cruel and unimaginable crimes, etc. So, all because of the vasanas. So, they are the dry fuel. Like there's no fuel, mere flow of butter, the clarified butter, ghee, will not produce a lasting flame. So, too, in the absence of vasanas, The Vishayas will not make for bondage. Supposing, there is so many things are kept before you, and you are sitting with eyes closed. You don't even see them. But the moment you open them, immediately the vasanas get connected. So, what is that? This connection between the vasanas and the sense objects and the indriyas, this triad, this bondage is to be broken. Then only the mukti or liberation is possible. So, this otherwise, this manomaya kosha, which is compared to yajna kunda, what happens? Completely, it burns to ashes. All what does it really burn? It burns this prapancha. Burn the prapancha means the life becomes absolutely worthless at the end of it, and one becomes not fit for the highest aspiration, namely mukti. So the real secret lies in breaking this bondage. What happens? How these vasanas become ineffective through intense sadhana. They kind of keep on rubbing these vasanas. Whenever you induct into the mind, induct into this chitta, such good sanskaras like japa, meditation, dhyana, prayer, etc. All these also leave impressions. Just eating rasagulla, smoking a cigarette, or drinking something, all that leave vasanas, which such vasanas we already have. In the same way, whatever you do good, like say practices, spiritual striving, all that, they leave vasanas in the mind. These vasanas go on, keep on just rubbing, all that. Then at some point of time, the old vasanas, because of the constant influx of new good vasanas, new samskaras, etc., the old vasanas become like dagda bhija avastha, they say. They say, supposing, a seed will sprout only when it is alive, active. It is that way, powerful. But by constant this kind of rubbing, by constant pouring of new good samskaras into the mind, the old vasanas, old things, etc., they get completely kind of rubbed off, and they become totally ineffective. They become like a burnt seed. The burnt seed cannot produce a new plant. Same way, the burnt vasanas, they cannot produce any more bondage, nor will they attract anything. The same thing you might have once, the very sight of rasagullas might have produced water in the mouth at one point of time. But constant sadhana, constant vichara, constant thinking of the bondage and the untold suffering it brings to jiva, slowly one develops it. But deliberately cultivating, absolutely no, I won't even look at it. Even look at it, it is poison. I will not take it. Supposing you have sugar, you might have had in number of rasagullas at one point of time. Now, because you are a discerning person, there are people who disobey and keep eating and suffering also. But if you are a discerning person, if you have the capacity of vichara, no, it's not good for me. I will not even look at it. I don't care. Keep hundreds of rasagullas before me. It doesn't produce any desire in me to eat. So the Rasagulla Vasana has become like a Dagda Bija, like a burnt seed in your mind stuff, Chitta, and it does not produce, it doesn't attract, it doesn't induce you to any action. No, let me go and eat it somehow. No. So this is what is called sadhana, and that is why sadhana is so important. So you keep on doing it, and then it loses its power, and slowly it goes away. Then afterwards you start the newer samskaras take over. So more you do japa, more you do prarthana, the more you do that taking the Lord's name, it produces more and more joy in you. Then you start indulging it more and more. Then those sanskars get strengthened, and those old sanskars virtually they practically they go away, and they are totally ineffective. But it all requires tremendous practice, tremendous sadhana. There's I think we have talked about it earlier also. There was a very great sadhu called Jagadanand. He was considered Brahmagya Purusha. He was the person who translated the great master Sharadanandaji into English, the first translation. Actually, he was married person before he became a monk. He was so attracted when he listened to certain uh, some classes on Upanishads, something, he simply, and then he came away. But he says it seems he told somebody, you do not know how much I wept and wept and wept and prayed to the Holy Mother. And that's how I could completely get rid of my samskaras. I can say that I've completely overcome them. He was considered a great Brahmagyani. But that entails tremendous sadhana, tremendous practice, striving constantly. Not that somehow some 15 minutes will sit or 20 minutes will sit something. Hour after hour. Why? See, because when you indulge in such strong, intense spiritual practices, what happens? One thing is you are not allowing the mind to indulge in useless things. If you're free, you have nothing to do, you open the TV, you do something, you talk over mobile, you see that, you do that. So, we are constantly adding new samskaras which are undesirable, which are unwanted, which are of the nature of bondage. But when you intensely practice, when we are deeply into sadhana, first of all, we are shutting all the negative roots, namely going somewhere, here, there. Mind is never going to be free. It is constantly busy, constantly moving, constantly trying. That's the nature of the mind. But because we are keeping the mind engaged elsewhere, it's not getting an opportunity to go so many other things. And then on the positive side, it constantly gives new vibrations, new samskaras, which are getting strengthened, strengthened, strengthened. So much so, whenever you see something is kirtan is going on, somebody is sitting, some mandir comes, some ashrama comes. So you're constantly, the mind gets immediately activated by that samskara, and you are tempted to do more and more and more of that, and that samskara gets strengthened. That's why these vasanas are so important. These vasanas, they are like the indhana, they are the fuel, and they are very essential for the fire of namely the power of attraction. So the mind is the cause of bondage, as explained again in two ways. Usually they take two ways: the anvaya and vatireka, explained it in a positive affirmative way and also in a negative way. How does he say? nahi nahi asti avidya manaso atirikta मनो ही अविद्या भवबंध हेतु तस्मिन् विनष्टे सकलं विनष्टम विजृंभतेस्मिन् सकलं विजृंभते. So there is no avidya apart from the mind. Nahi astya vidya manaso atirikta. Manaso atirikta, apart from the mind, there is no other avidya. Because the whole thing is mind only. That is a seat. There is a locus. That is what only through the mind everything happens. If the mind is not there, it doesn't gather anything. So that we'll explain slowly. The mind is clearly the avidya. Mind itself is avidya. The cause of bondage of the samsara. Samsara bandha hetu is a karana, is a cause for the bondage of samsara. Tasmin vinashye sakalam vinashtam. When that is lost, when it is destroyed, when that is stilled, everything is lost or still. When the mind is, what happens in deep meditation? You are so deeply absorbed. There's nothing else. Everything else, all the modifications, all the desires, all the actions, all the world, everything becomes quiet because the mind is totally quiet. When the mind is absolutely quiet, tasmin vinashte sakalam vinashtam. Tasmin vijrumbate sakalam vijrumbate. And when it reappears and grows, everything reappears and grows into consciousness. So the whole thing is manas. Is it not? Maneva manusyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. Mind is the reason for the bandha and moksha, bandhana and moksha. Both are because of the mind. So again, they constantly bring this example. In dreamless sleep, what happens? There persists, there is some, what is called the karana vidya or the causal ignorance, no doubt there. But yet, there is no bondage at that time. You don't feel any attraction, you don't feel repulsion. The mind alone, which is the effect of the avidya, that makes the bondage. In dreamless sleep, the mind is stilled. Mind is absolutely quiet. It's not into any activity. In fact, the very existence of the mind is known only when we come back from the sleep. When we are in a state of dreamless sleep, There's no experience of the mind. Mind is totally stilled. So there's no avidya apart from the mind. Mind is the only thing present in dreamless sleep, but then it is also not into any action. Hence, the cause of the bondage, that is, the cause of bondage of samsara is avidya, and being its effect, the mind only. Mind is the effect of avidya. So that alone is responsible for everything. If the mind is functioning, there is bondage in the form of identification of the body, etc. If it is not functioning, the identification does not exist. This both by the method of affirmation, because if it exists, everything exists, is affirmation. If it doesn't exist, nothing exists, negation. So by anvaya and vatireka, see, it is seen that mind seems to be the cause of all bondage. Is it not? It's a little subtle idea, but we can easily understand. Whatever we do, by chance, if the mind is absent, we don't even notice anything. Someone very dear, someone very close to you, someone comes into your room, right in front of you, two very well built people, tall people are standing, but you're not seeing them because you're so deeply engrossed in something else. They are right in front of your eyes. Why? Because the mind is not there. See, the mind is so powerful that only causes for all the identification, it causes for all the bondage. So, again, first he said, Sasmin Vanashte, Sakalam Vinashtam. When it is destroyed, something is destroyed. Vijrambate Tasmin, Sakalam Vijrambate. So, when the mind reappears and grows into functioning, everything acquires growth. That's why, in the sleep, dreamless sleep, when the mind is still, everything is still. Your body, house, these, that. Ramakrishna gives such a beautiful example. You have so much of pride, ahankara. In sleep, somebody does something dirty on you, you don't even know such a thing has happened. Only when you get up, you come to know. That is all about your ahankara. You have so much of ego, but this is the power of ego. This is what you can do. So, in the sleep, everything is still, so there is no experience. When the mind reappears and grows into various kinds of functioning, then aham and mama, all that appear, then everything acquires, everything comes into, springs into life as it were, and then they slowly regain full consciousness after during the sleep, and the world also comes into existence, so to say. So you see, the when uh, when the mind is completely tasmin vinashte, what is that? Visheshena nirvasanam vinashte. So when it's completely destroyed, the mind is totally destroyed. There's not even any vasana or anything. It's in a state of supreme samadhi or that kind of a spiritual experience, then nothing remains. So that is why this is the power of mind. That is how it acts, etc. And then again, he explains in another sloka. Actually, Shankaracharya is spending so much slokas so that we get again and again the idea. That's why he said, in one sloka we heard, then we understood how this vasana is creating everything, how it is leaving those kinds of marks called bhija in the mind. Is it not? So again, in the next look, I will explain. One more time you hear, again this idea gets formed so that, whenever you see anything which is supposed to be worthy of enjoyment, which is attractive to others, immediately remember, oh, it's in Vivekachudamani, we learned how this mind is the cause of all bondage. No, let me not go there. Let me not think of it. Let me not participate in it. Again, it will leave another mark in the mind, and that's not necessary. That will lead to bondage. So, one more sloka is explaining. स्वप्ने अर्धशून्ये सृजति स्वशक्तिया भोक्त्रादि विश्वं मन एव सर्वं तथैव जागृत्यपि नो विशेषः तत्सर्वं एतन् मनसो विजृंभणम्. You see, in the absence of external objects, swapne arthashunye, there are no external objects, arthashunye, in the dream, swapne, srijati swashakshya. So the mind alone creates everything by its own power. What does it create? Bhoktradi, Vishwam, Manayeva Sarva. It creates in the world, everything, the enjoyer. Enjoyer enjoyed and the object of enjoyment. Everything is created with the mind. There's nothing. See, there is no question of even the enjoyer. See, in the Sapna, you see a beautiful, say you go, you are in a beautiful restaurant, you have ordered for many wonderful dishes, then they are being served, you are eating, it's so delicious, you cannot believe such delicacy can be there in the world. You are eating there, it's a creation of the mind, because you are not there at all. The objects that are being served, namely the bhogya vastu, it's a creation. And then the enjoyment, namely you are eating, you are tasting it, it's all again by the mind only. So all the bhokta, bhogya vastu, and also the action, the enjoyment, everything is the enjoyment, enjoyer, and the action of enjoyment. Karta karma karana. Everything is created by the mind only. So what Shankaracharya says, Tativa Jagritapi no Visheshaha Sarvam Etan Manaso Vijrumpana. So in the same way, there is no difference in the waking state also. Tativa Jagratyapi no Visheshaha. There is no difference. What is that? All that is only the expansion of the mind. Sat Sarvam Etan Manaso Vijrumpana. They all arise. The mind only gives arise to all that, even in the Jagrata. Of course, it's very, you may find it very difficult to believe because we are experiencing it daily. It's all happening. Every moment we are experiencing. How do you say, yes, in the Sapna we understand, maybe, but how can that be in the Jagrat or the waking state? That, of course, that is explained here in this sloka. Again, every idea is explained in two ways. This Anvaya affirmative and the Vatireka in the negative. What is this now is Anvaya and the positive way, what affirmative way, what is saying? The Suchi teaches that activity of the mind in the absence of external objects is the dream state. At that time, in the minute idea, and the nerves and every this thing, so many ideas, mountains, rivers, oceans, everything is seen. Is not possible at all as the sense organs such as the eyes, etc., are not functioning. And the mind cannot go out through them. See, normally, how do you get any experience? The mind goes out through the sense, namely eye, gets in touch with the sense object, and then only it's brought back, and then finally the buddhi takes the decision what it is, and that's how the experience happens. But the eyes are not functional. They are closed in the swapna. There is no question of the mind going out. So the mind is not going anywhere. So the objects existing outside the body cannot be perceived. Whatever is there, the ocean, the mountain, these, they all cannot be perceived at all. But they appear to have their locus outside due to the vasanas persisting in the mind. Again, all that connected with the earlier thing, earlier we might have seen it has happened, that's why they come up. Otherwise, there is new experience at all. See, in the swapna, is there any fresh experience at any time? Nothing fresh. It all has happened earlier. They are coming up, they are being brought to the forefront of the mind because the vasanas, they are lying in a very powerful way, active. They are not burnt seeds, they are active seeds, they are really living seeds, so to say. So they bring out. See, it's all due to the vasana present in the mind. Really, they do not exist at all outside. So that's why it says artha somya, the absence of material objects. In the dream state of such a kind, the mind creates by its own power, swashaktiya. What does it create? By the reflection in itself by its tendencies, all the objects of the world. So everything is created by that. So of course the question may be raised, if the jiva is the experiencer, how can knowledge also be the experience object? How can it be both experiencer and the experience? Should there not be so two separate things? In the absence of an experienced object, there can be no enjoy. There cannot be enjoyer if there is no experienced object. So the mind is the cause of creation of the experience object. That is very clear. Whatever we experience is all by the mind. So it implies that the experiencer, and it must be taken that it creates the experiencer because the experiences are correlatives. Whenever there is to experience any object, there is the experiencer. Without the experiencer, there won't be any experience. Similarly, without any experiencing object, there cannot be any, the experiencer cannot experience anything. So these they so in this the dream state, apparently, actually, normally in the waking state we think it is not possible. In the dream state, the mind only creates the objects for enjoyment. It creates the enjoyer also, because the enjoyer otherwise is lying absolutely uh, with closed eyes, with absolutely no activities, hands, feet, etc., are completely silent, yet is going into a five-star hotel and enjoying a very wonderful meal at the best of delicacies. So the experiencer, the experience, and the object of experience are all created by the mind only. There is no other entity. So that is why they say mind is the creator of the bondage. That is what creates bondage, and it is the reason for all the avidya, etc. Not only that, he says there is no difference between what is happening in the dream and what is happening in the waking state, because the expansion of the mind, that is what leads to all the uh, experiences of the waking state. How there is no difference between the waking and the dream state, we will take up next time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So, as I said yesterday, first is Shivaratri. Whole night there will be puja. Let's enjoy the bliss of Shivaratri together. You can all come and offer uh, on the offer to Shiva milk, honey, ghee, dadi, everything, and also Ganga Jal. Whole night, all are allowed to stay. Please do come. And again on 4th, we have Thakur's birthday. Right from Usha Kirtan, we'll have all celebrations as in the previous years.